Nobody coached that moment. No publicist arranged it. No camera crew was positioned for it. No one on the Dodgers media team sent a signal to make sure the angle was captured cleanly. It happened the way the best moments in sports always happen, sideways, between the things everyone was already watching, in the space where preparation ends and something more private begins. Shohei Ohtani had entered game mode. Anyone who has watched him long enough knows what that phrase means in practice. It is not a metaphor. It is not a media description invented to add color to a pre-game segment. It is a visible, physical shift, a narrowing of focus that happens somewhere around the time he finishes his warm-up and begins moving toward the version of himself that only appears when the game is real. The eyes change. The posture changes. Something behind the expression closes off to everything that is not directly relevant to what is about to happen on the field. It is the look of a man who has reduced the world to a single task. And in that moment, inside that locked-in stillness, that competitive silence, Mamiko appeared beside him. She handed him water. Then a cold towel. Then, without a word, without waiting for acknowledgement, without any visible need for the exchange to be anything more than what it was, she stepped back. That was it. 15 seconds. Maybe less. And yet by the next morning, that 15 seconds was being discussed in clubhouses, on broadcast panels, in comment sections across 3 languages. Not because it was dramatic. Not because anything unusual had happened. But because of how natural it was. There is a particular kind of intimacy that only exists between 2 people who have built a shared language over time. It does not announce itself. It does not perform. It operates in the small, functional moments, the ones that would be invisible to anyone who didn't know what they were looking at. A glance across a room that carries a full sentence. A gesture that lands before the thought that prompted it has finished forming. An understanding of what the other person needs before that person has expressed the need. What the camera captured between Ohtani and Mamiko was exactly that. She didn't ask him if he wanted water. She didn't wait to see if he would reach for it. She knew, with the certainty of someone who has been present for enough of these moments to understand their rhythm, that this was the point in his preparation where his body needed something and his mind was too far inside the game to ask for it. So she provided it. Quietly. Efficiently. The way you do something when it has long since stopped requiring thought. And then she stepped back. That last part is the part that stayed with people. Ohtani is not an easy person to be close to, not because of any coldness in him, but because of the sheer scale of what surrounds him. The attention that follows him into every room. The weight of expectation that has attached itself to his name in a way that most athletes never fully experience. The constant presence of people who need something from him, a performance, a quote, an autograph, an image, a moment they can carry away and point to later. To exist beside all of that without being consumed by it requires something most people underestimate. Mamiko has done it without making it a story. That is, in its own way, extraordinary. She has been present at the edges of his professional life in the way that the people who genuinely support someone tend to be present, not in the center of the frame, not building their own narrative from proximity to his, but simply there. Reliable. Constant. Oriented entirely toward him rather than toward the audience watching him. What the moment with the water and the cold towel revealed is that her presence is not ceremonial. She is not standing nearby because the occasion calls for it. She is standing nearby because she understands the occasion better than most people in the building do. Game mode, for Ohtani, is not a switch that flips at first pitch. People who have spent time around him in the hours before a game, coaches, teammates, trainers who work in the quiet parts of the facility that cameras don't reach, describe a gradual process. A slow withdrawal from the social temperature of the clubhouse. Conversations get shorter. Eye contact becomes less frequent. The part of him that is generous and curious and genuinely warm in an ordinary moment begins to recede, replaced by something more concentrated and less available. It is not unfriendly. His teammates understand it as something closer to respect, for the game, for the opponent, for the version of himself he needs to be when the ball is live. But it also means that in those final minutes before competition, Ohtani exists somewhere that is not fully accessible. He is already partially inside the game. Already running calculations that have nothing to do with the room he is physically standing in. The water and the towel arrived in exactly that window. And Mamiko delivered them in a way that required nothing from him. No response. No interruption to the internal process. No moment where he had to shift back toward the social world in order to receive something he needed. She moved around his concentration rather than through it. That is a specific skill. And it belongs to someone who has watched him carefully enough, for long enough, to know exactly where the edges of that concentration are. The reaction from people who saw the footage spread across the predictable channels, social media first, then the sports commentary programs, then the quieter corners of fan communities where these things are discussed with more patience and less noise. But what was notable was the tone. In a media environment that has a habit of turning every private moment involving a public figure into material for speculation or judgment, the reaction to this one was almost uniformly soft. People did not analyze it for hidden meaning. They did not construct a narrative around it or use it as evidence for an argument they were already making. They simply found it moving. Several people described it with variations of the same word, natural. The thing that made it worth discussing was the precise absence of performance in it. Mamiko didn't look at the cameras before she stepped forward. She didn't look at them after. The cold towel was folded the way you fold something when you've folded it the same way many times before. The step back, when it came, was immediate, not a linger, not a pause to see if anything more was needed. Just the completion of an action that had already been fully thought through before it began. It was a private moment that happened to be visible. And people recognized it for what it was. There is a version of this story that is about baseball. About preparation and routine and the systems elite athletes build around themselves to protect the mental state that performance requires. And that version is real. Ohtani's preparation is among the most studied and discussed in the sport. Every element of how he approaches a game, the warm-up sequences, the dietary precision, the sleep protocols, the careful management of what enters his awareness in the hours before competition, has been observed and reported on by people who cover the Dodgers for a living. The cold towel fits inside that version. It is a recovery tool. A regulation of body temperature at a specific point in a specific sequence. Entirely practical. Entirely consistent with the level of physical intentionality that defines how he operates. But there is another version of this story. And it does not contradict the first one. It is the version where Mamiko is not a support staff. Where the cold towel is not a recovery protocol. Where what happened in those 15 seconds is simply a person who loves someone, who understands that person deeply, doing a small thing at exactly the right moment in exactly the right way. Both versions are true simultaneously. That is what made the moment feel so complete. In the post-game hours, when reporters gathered and the questions settled into their familiar patterns, no one asked Ohtani directly about what had been captured. It was the right call. Some moments are better left as moments. Some things diminish when you press them for explanation. But someone, toward the end of a separate exchange, asked him a broader question about what makes him feel settled before a big game. What conditions help him compete at the level he competes at? He thought about it for a moment. He said something about routine. About knowing what to expect in the environment around him. About the way familiarity allows him to spend less energy on things that don't directly relate to the game. He paused there. Then he added, quietly, that having the right people around you matters more than any individual habit or preparation method. That the people who understand what you need, without requiring you to explain it every time, are the ones who actually allow you to focus. He didn't mention the towel. He didn't mention the water. He didn't say her name. He didn't need to. Everyone in the room had seen the footage. Shohei Ohtani will play hundreds more games. He will hit home runs that travel distances that make analysts reach for comparisons they don't quite have. He will pitch outings where the movement on his sweeper looks like something outside the physics of what a baseball is supposed to do. He will produce moments that end up in year-end packages and Hall of Fame arguments and conversations between strangers in sports bars who can't quite believe what they just saw. Those moments will be loud. They will be enormous. They will carry the full weight of his extraordinary talent and the full attention of a sport that is still trying to find a category large enough to hold him. But somewhere between the loudness, there will be other moments. Small ones. Private ones. Ones that happen in the minutes before the game begins, when the competitive machinery is already running and the world outside has not yet caught up. A paper cup of water. A folded cold towel. A step back taken without hesitation. 15 seconds that required no explanation. Because some things between two people need none.